Louise Phelan here. Welcome to another Boost Talk. I've just had a fabulous conversation with Hajira Shaheen, who is founder and learning designer at Talim Consulting. What I discovered is that what fills Shaheen's cup is using all her skills to make a difference in the world. And that has been a theme throughout her entire career. She talks about herself as a Swiss Army knife of learning design, and she has some fabulous comments and insights to make around identity, strengths, feedback, trans-based leadership. It's a fabulous conversation, and I hope you will join us. Enjoy the conversation, and welcome to Boost Talk. Hello everyone, Louise Phelan here, and welcome to Boost Talk. Today I'm in conversation with Hajira Shaheen, who is founder and learning designer at Talim Consulting. We have with us today a trained scientist, passionate about design thinking, mental modes and cognitive methodologies. Welcome to Boost Talk, Shaheen.
Hi, Louise. Thanks for having me.
You are so welcome. Today we're talking about In Her Element, a personal journey in learning. And I'm delighted to have you here. Your journey is remarkably different from a lot of other women's journeys. So the opportunity to have a conversation is wonderful. So thank you so much. And that's where I'd like to start. I'd like to start by asking you about your career journey, because you have something called full stack training that I don't even understand at all. So perhaps that will come through in our conversation. And you're now establishing your own business, your own consulting business. Now, I can only assume there's an incredibly interesting story in there, and I'd love for you to share some of that with us.
Sure. So when I call myself a full stack learning designer, what I really mean is, I think it's the professional way of calling myself what I would generally call a Swiss Army knife of learning design. So I've done it all in the last 13 years is basically what I'm trying to say. So I did my graduation, started working in a big tech company as sales and marketing. Realized pretty quickly I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life. But what I was interested in was the training piece that I was doing on the side. And so I left there, did a master's in learning in sciences and technology at University of Sydney. And I think that's kind of where my current chapter begins. There's different chapters in my life, right?
Absolutely. Every woman has some wonderful chapters in their life, and it's interesting to have the conversation around the influences for that. So the master's was part of that journey.
It definitely was. Yes. I remember walking onto the campus of UCID and being like, this is my place. This is where I want to be.
Oh,
And it
oh.
was just it was a feeling that my soul felt. This is like, this is the place for me. And so absolutely loved doing my master's for 2 years, and then did my first job in L&D actually at Macquarie University. So again, went back to the university as staff. There I was teaching people, teaching professors how to teach, bringing in some corporate into the academic life, working with students. And if I now think back on all of the dots that have brought me where I am and joining those dots, I think one of my first experiences at the university was around working with First and Family students, working with First Nation students, working with migrant students, and helping them guide their way to an Australian university system, because that's different from, other things that they've probably had in their lives. And really enjoyed that. But I think that was also the point where I started to realize the privilege that I have in my current life, and how could I bring that more to life, if you will. So that was just a seed that was dropped then.
Yeah.
There, I moved on to a learning consulting firm. So working with, big clients as part of a consulting team, working with sales and developing e-learning for them, running design and discovery workshops, That's also when I trained to be a coach. So all of these are little things that I put in my bucket to call myself a full stack learning designer. So e-learning, coaching, design thinking. And again, really enjoyed that part of my life where I was problem solving on the go. I was helping people out, giving people ideas to think about learning differently. Often we think about learning that happens in a workshop or a Zoom room, but there's so many different ways we learn. And so, trying to get people to think a bit differently and out of the box when it came to learning. And I think when I was in my learning consulting role and started to do some coaching, I started to see the impact words and feelings and conversations can have on people. And the seed of, oh my God, I have so much privilege. What can I do with it? Just got deeper, if you will. Um, so I did a diploma I did a fellowship in social impact to really start to think about, well, what can I do? I spent 8 hours of my life working. What if I use these 8 hours to do some good?
Oh, gosh.
So those
You,
eight, you saying something?
well, what I was thinking was you talk about these seeds. Are they the seeds that you see now retrospectively, or were you aware of this progression at the time?
No, I definitely wasn't aware.
Okay.
I've always done mentoring on the side of, my mom teases me about, as a kid, I would sit around rain puddles and put little sticks in the water so the ants could come out, and I was saving little ant
Oh,
ants. So I think
gorgeous.
I was always that child. But
Oh,
I think none of that, and as you said, it's only now, all of these years later that I can see how all of those things, that plus, being a deep thinker, being having the experiences I've had, meeting some amazing humans, all of those things have added up to bring me to where I am. And it's that domino effect that I think you don't realize in the moment.
no, no. There's something about the combination of the experiences that we have and the core of our being, who we are, how we approach the world, our philosophy, our values, all of that. But it's that mix of the two that only comes with reflective practice, which is something that I'm hearing in your conversation, and yet we often miss it as a huge piece of the puzzle that you obviously to make those connections, to see the seeds, if you will. There's a deep reflective practice that we don't overtly discuss, I don't think. So you obviously reflected at each stage and looked at what worked, what didn't, and what was sparking your interest and your joy.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, Louise. I've always made intentional choices about what I want to do next and where I want to be. And part of that looking forward starts from looking backwards. And so I
yeah.
think that reflective practice came into being. It's like, oh, I really enjoyed this role, what I've done for the last 3 years. What did I enjoy? What do I want to do more of? What do I want to do less of? And making sure that I kind of chart my own path in the direction that I want to move.
There is a theme though, and you are spot on. I was reading in your bio that what fills her cup is using all of her skills to make a difference in the world. And that's clearly what I'm hearing. So how is that playing out now? Where are you at in your career journey?
So so about 6 months ago, I launched my own business, Talim Consulting. Thank you. It's been a labor of love and patience and all of that, but really enjoying it, I have to admit. So Talim in Arabic stands for education or learning. So it is a learning consulting.
Perfect.
And everything that we do at Talim is about amplifying the voices of the fringe and making sure our designs are inclusive. So what that means in simpler terms is if there's a learning program I'm designing or a leadership program I'm designing, I want to make sure that it is equally accessible to everybody.
Mm.
And what that definitely means is thinking about who are the people on the fringe, who are participants and humans in this program, and designing for them. Because what I generally find is if you don't have a lens of inclusion to the work you're doing, you're often unintentionally designing for the majority because that's the bias and the privilege you bring into a
Mm.
conversation.
Absolutely. And that's the difference that you bring to not just your consulting, but to your world. That lens of inclusion. That's fantastic. I mean, I look at you, okay, so you're female, you wear a hijab, you're establishing your own business, you're entrepreneurial. What are the biggest challenges that you faced through all of that? And and you would have, I don't even know why I'm saying have you. You've obviously, because of all of those factors, you've experienced unique experiences and gained perspectives that others wouldn't have. Can you name that? How have they shaped your career and your work?
Um, a lot of it, I would say. When I hear that question, I find that quite interesting because I think naturally I think about the perspectives I've gained more than the challenges. And
Yeah.
yes, there are challenges. And yes, I think we all know being a female, being a person of color, being so visually, having a certain identity plays into it. And a
Mm.
lot of time it comes across to me as microaggressions where people think they're trying to be nice, where, some of the comments I'll get is, oh yeah, English is really good. Like, I've been speaking it for like 30 something years. So yes, thank you.
Oh dear.
Um, or
Uh,
I think another one of my favorites is because I do a lot of traveling alone. They'll be like, oh, you travel alone by yourself. I'm like, as does all of Australia. It's just like, why am I special because I do that? What the unsaid in those conversations is people like you don't do this.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So there's
And
this,
my experience is that I haven't ever seen people like you do that.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because my
Just
identity is quite strong as, if you talk, and I find identity, and we could talk about this for the whole hour, I find the
oh, do let's.
I find the idea of identity really fascinating because what you see as somebody who doesn't know me as my identity would be very different from somebody who knows me from how I think of myself. So if you talk to me, I think of myself as a hiker, a baker, an adventurer in life. I think of myself as an improviser, a learning designer. There's all of these things. And yes, being a Muslim woman and a person of color and a woman are part of my identity, but it's not what I'm leading with. It's just who I am. It's what I've been for how many ever decades now.
Yeah.
So it's not a big part of what I think about when I
Yeah.
think of my identity. And I sometimes forget I have this cloth on my head that people can perceive in a certain way, whereas I don't think that's a limitation in any way. And which
No.
is why when I do things and I'm in quote air quotes spaces where I'm not meant to be, people go like, oh, and I'm just like, oh right, that's right, because you don't expect me to be here, but hell, I'm here
Yeah.
and I'm gonna own it. Um, so I think there's those unwritten challenges, I think, in terms of there's possibly opportunities or things that have just not come my way because nobody has sat down and had a conversation with me to understand my value or my work or what I do, but have disregarded it based on what I look like.
Yeah.
But what I do also think, and that's a big part of where I am, is my perspectives that have been shaped because of who I am. So, as I was saying, the privilege of having a platform and thanks to you and others like you who've sat down and have a conversation with me that gives me this platform. All of the conference talks I do, all of the work I've done in the past, all of that adds up as a way of me being able to represent other people who look like me and are like me, but don't necessarily have that platform.
Mm.
So I think that's the perspective that I like to think about in all of my work, because I was so privileged to have been born in a family where education was important, and mom's a teacher, dad's an engineer, brown girl child in India, but education was celebrated. Being a girl was celebrated. We are three sisters, like dad is a minority in our house. We are a very, very female driven house. And dad loves all of us. And so feeling that safety and security as a child and feeling the confidence that you can do what you want, that was so instrumental now that I think about our upbringing and where all of us are in our lives. And so
Mm.
that's the perspective that I think drives me forward into be like, I got that opportunity and it had nothing to do with, like, I was just lucky to be born in that family. I have that opportunity. What can I do to assist the voices around me to elevate them and make them more heard and amplify them?
Mm. That's just it's it's remarkably inspirational that you go that next step, because I understand the difference that you experienced in India, because not all women and young girls have the opportunities or have the support that you obviously had in your formative years. And for people who don't understand or don't know Indian culture, that might be a bit strange. But women certainly don't have the same status as men in India, particularly when you were growing up. So to have a father who supported you, to then be in an environment that supported you, there's a lot to be said for the love we give our children and the end result that that creates. Absolutely. And what I want to celebrate in you is that one step further, that I'm blessed. I would like to bless other people. That's not how everyone responds. So there's an intuitive value set in you that seems to be driving career progression, career choices, and behaviours.
Oh, thank you for that. I Yeah, for me, it's the most obvious thing. It's a big part of my faith and my culture to lift people around us and be a part of a community. So I couldn't think of any other ways unless, the absolute gratitude for where I am and what else would I do with it if not pass it along.
Yeah, yeah. And I love that you talk about perspective as opposed to challenge, that situations allow us to gain, to learn, to grow, to have a different perspective. So seeing them in that light creates a different response in us, a different language set, a different emotional response. So we're able to then um, reflect and gain knowledge, which then creates that perspective. You make it sound so easy. I think we both I think we both know that it's not quite that simple. And that gets me thinking around my work. So Boost Your Career is about enhancing women's impact in the workplace. And I talk about holding agency, so being accountable for and taking responsibility for empowering yourself to own your voice, yourself, your confidence, your future. Um, where I get to is your experiences are similar because it's about your impact and your cognitive around that and you're making decisions. But Have you thought about the key skills? So what's the underlying fundamentals that women need to learn to be successful in the professional world? Have you gone that far in your thinking?
I'm going to throw a curly at you.
Oh, goody. I love that. I'm excited already.
So, my short answer to that is I think we all need to lean into our strengths, whatever that is. And I do think while I do think there's a problem in our society where we think about men and women as polarities.
Yeah.
We know that there are, you know, qualities and energies that both men and women have. And depending on the different human, they're all on different levels. The problem with the patriarchal, misogynistic society that we live in is that often if men try and think about their feminine energy, they're called too emotional. And if women start to talk about and be more assertive, they're called to air quotes bossy.
Yeah.
And so what I think we should all do is just lean into whatever energies we have, and that's going to be a different mix for everybody, and focus on those strengths. And so,
I agree more because that creates the authenticity of self then.
exactly. And
Yeah.
I'm a very, I do leadership training, and I always talk about strengths-based leadership because every time we do a strengths, every time we do any kind of strengths testing for our leaders, people go straight to their bottom five and what can I improve on? And I just go like, no, no, let's look at your top three because there's a greater chance of you being successful if you focus on your strengths and lean onto them. Yeah, sure, try and also develop new skills. Learning and developing new skills is always great, but lean into your strengths. And so that's where I think my frame comes from is I think about what's uniquely Shaheen and lean into that. And tying this back, I think, into your question around when I started Talim, I didn't, I wanted to do entrepreneurship on my terms. You know, when you start a business, you're told, oh, it's going to be hard for the first how many ever years. You are going to have to work these many hours. You'll have to do BD and cold calling. Like there's a lot of, you'll have to do these. And I kind of made up my mind and said, I'm doing this because I want to do it. If this becomes a chore, I'd rather just go back and do it, you know, find a great job and do it. I don't have a problem with that. And so I wanted to do entrepreneurship the Shaheen way. And whatever that was going to come up in the, you know, next year or so. But for me, that's what I've always done is just being really reflective on what works for me and leaned into that as opposed to thinking about, you know, what um, what are you know the female strengths that I lead into, for instance.
Yeah. There's an openness and a growth mindset in you that allows, what am I going to say? That allows a very positive perspective. I'm not convinced. Well, that's not even true. I'm being polite. I know that that's not as not as common as we would both like that to be in this world. Um, and I hear what you're saying about strengths. I'm a firm believer in strengths-based learning, and I think it's as simple as, you know, if I'm high performing and all of a sudden I do even more, it's you know, I'm super performing really quickly, whereas if I'm working on my on my weaknesses, I can be working on them for the next 50 years and someone may never notice that that's happened. So I get, and they sort of pull one another. There is some sort of symbiotic relationship between the two. I get that piece because I think that's absolutely crucial. The number of people that I meet, and I'd love to hear if that's your experience, who have no idea what their strengths are, whose self-awareness is so low
Mm,
that they're unaware of self, unaware of impact,
mm,
unaware of strengths. That all creates a bit of a mess in my book in terms of professional growth, personal growth, in terms of future success. So when I talk about what's important, yes, leaning into strengths is really important. And yet that's downplaying all of the steps that need to happen for someone to lean into their strengths. And that's what I find we don't talk about a lot.
mm.
We don't sort of get down to the nitty gritty of, well, what does it take? And I think it's because we are who we are, and we do what we do. And unless we reflect on it and start to recognize how clever we are, how positive we are, there's never going to be a shift in anyone. And that's the platform that I think, because we were talking about this before, that's the platform that I think Boost Talk provides women. That, yeah, we need to lean into our strengths. Well, how do we do that? What do you think? What's Shaheen done to lean into her strengths?
Um, I'll get to that, but I just wanted to also quickly point out that yes, and the reason I was so excited to come on this podcast and talk with you is exactly that. Unfortunately, there is a cultural, societal problem with people, and especially women, thinking and talking about strengths. We all talk about the tall poppy syndrome. Um, you have been lovely and gracious and showering me with great things to say for the last 20 minutes. 5, 6 years ago, I would have sat here and squirmed at each of the praise because we are not taught to take praise graciously. And I think I've been on this journey where I didn't jump in and go like, oh, yeah, thank you. But actually, and it's like make excuses for being great. So that has been a learning journey for me. So I totally appreciate the fact that we don't think about our strengths because we are meant to be humble. And by being humble, and there's a very subtle difference. I don't think I'm arrogant, but I can take praise because I know, and this is the answer to your question. I know my strengths, and if you recognize it, I will say thank you without adding a but clause to it. So the work I've done to get here is I have reflected on what people say, but I've also asked people for feedback. I'm in learning. It's something that comes a lot more naturally to me to give and receive feedback. And so every time I was in a role and I was leaving the role or I would do a workshop, I would genuinely ask people, give me your feedback because I want to get better. And I genuinely want to get better. And what I would hear back is, you're great at this or this or this. And I would add that to my backpack to pull out later. And sometimes I would dig deeper into when somebody said you were good at this. So one of the things that I often hear is, you're good at facilitating a conversation, you're good at running a workshop. And I'd be like, what part of it?
Yeah.
Because I can't get better at being good at something if I don't know what exactly it is. And
It's
and
the
so
behaviors, isn't it? It's naming those behaviors so we can do it again.
exactly, it's like, how
Yeah.
can I repeat this?
Yeah.
So is it the tone of my voice? Is it my listening? And so all of these things started to come up, but I had to dig deeper for it. So that's definitely one of my practice, is to genuinely ask people, but I also generally ask for advice on how to be better. And that, I think, counters the what are my strengths. And then the other piece is to do a retrospective at the end of every big project or piece of work, even sometimes the end of the day, to be in my personal life, think about I had this moment with one of my family members or my friends. What did I do wrong? What could I have done better? How should I have approached this? What was the other person thinking? So yes, reflection is a big part of it, and I think all of those things, when you live a more intentional life, work or personal, I think it helps you to start to see things in a much better light. And so we're only talking about strengths now, but I could spend another 20 minutes talking to you about all of the things that I need to improve on, because that's also part of my reflective practice that I'm working on day to
Part
day.
of your journey.
It is part of the
It's,
journey.
yeah.
Exactly.
Mm, yeah.
And so yeah, so I think reflection, asking people for feedback, and doing more of what you're good at, and continuing to collect more feedback is all part of helping me realize my skills.
It's
And
the change process. I talk about it in terms of awareness, audit, action. And the awareness piece is the feedback. Why people choose not to seek feedback is beyond me. How else do you know how you're going? You don't. You can't. So if impact is crucial to career success, then seeking feedback has to be. The audit part is that self-assessment, that reflective piece, and if you don't have a daily reflective practice, what are you doing? How could you be better the next day? And then if there's no action, if you don't actually do anything, then the change will never occur. So what you've just described is, for me, a living example of a positive change process. And I suppose this is an opportunity to spread that word, people. Seek feedback, reflect, and actually do something to change behaviours. Thank you. I know we weren't going to go there, but it's a really interesting part of every woman's career journey, coming to grips with those three simple actions of seeking feedback, doing the reflective practice, and actually putting some change actions into place.
you've definitely
So,
figured out those three stages a lot better than what I did, Louise.
no, I suppose because I'm at the other end of my journey, and I've had years of reflective practice, and I think one of my skills is that I can take very complex processes and very simply discuss them in ways that make practical. I'm very pragmatic, practical sense, and that's part of this conversation, that women underscore their skills and their strengths, because they're never really reflecting on what am I doing to create that outcome. And it's a really simple question, but it's one that we could all do so well to
Yeah.
take and do something with.
And I think, this is the problem, is because we are often told we must behave in a certain way. And so instead of looking inwards, we are looking outwards for, if I want the next promotion, and then, you go online and there's all of these articles on what should you do to get your next promotion? What should you do to get your voice be heard? And we take all of that external stuff to direct us instead of looking inwards and be like, actually, in my life, when have I moved forward? Actually, in my life, when has that conversation been really useful? And therefore, should I just do more of that? And that's the problem, that's the whirlwind that I think as women we get lost in, because we're still often dictated by what others think we should do. And that always has a masculine twist to it,
Of
because
course
they're
it does.
inherited from that society. And I think this again goes back to what we were talking earlier about. There's nothing wrong with being a woman. It's because the society that we live in has somehow decided that women are different and women are the weaker sex. And so if we only went like, no, yes, we are different, but that doesn't mean one or the other is the better. So I'm just going to do what I do better.
Yeah. Oh, I couldn't agree more.
Mm,
The professional workplace was established by men historically, traditionally.
mm,
It makes sense that it plays to, that it supports innately male strengths. Women bring a completely different set of skills to the table. And our job is to not avoid them and do them, up our male strengths. It's to embrace our female strengths and
mm.
use those for good, not evil, in the workplace to get great outcomes. It can be a fight, I suppose. And I think you learn to be more yourself as you get older, and your assertiveness becomes much more natural as you get older. It doesn't happen without thought, though. And that's where you and I are in such agreement that without that reflective practice, none of this will ever happen. It's yeah, your insights are fabulous. I've really appreciated it. I did just I know we're running out of time, but I did look up your name because it's very beautiful. And I discovered it means one who migrates, which thrilled me because it reflects your journey so beautifully. Migrating to another country, there's a huge blend of personal, social, and practical skills to adapt to a new environment, to build connections, to navigate daily life, and to create the dreams that you want to create. How important has all of that been to creating your career success, do you think?
Oh, so much, so much. As you said, I think migrants bring so much, such a wealth of knowledge, and innately need to be resilient and adaptable and change makers to do anything. You have to adapt quickly, you have to learn the ways of working. And so you naturally you do have a lot of those skills.
Yeah.
And so, yes, all of that has gone in. I also moved here at a fairly young age. And so my identity was still not solidified, I think, when I moved here. And so I went through that. And I might sound all wise and knowledgeable now, Louise, but when I came, I was struggling with my identity.
Awesome.
Wanted to be a certain person. I wanted to fit in, and so I went through that whole phase, right? And so,
Nice.
as you do, it's a journey, and I'm never gonna disown that. So yes, I've been through my own journey, and so I think as a migrant, I've picked up on those skills, and this is one of the things that I talk a lot about, even in my work, is unfortunately another thing that we do is we judge people's ideas based on the language and the accent. And sometimes that means we leave some of the best ideas on the table.
Mm.
And so, if we started to see migrants and refugees, for instance, as these incredible humans who are naturally more resistant and resilient and adaptable and great at what they do, because of the lives they've lived and the different perspectives that they bring to the table, there'd just be so much value. But that's something that we seem to forget in the current context that we live in.
Yeah. Our perception is so entrenched in the visual and verbal cues. Our bias is so entrenched and supported by that, that it's scary actually when you think about the wealth of perspective that we can gain from all humans. And I suppose that's one of my fundamental drives, is that you never know what you will learn in any conversation that you have with anyone. So if I, pardon me, if I approach engagements and conversations with an open mind and heart, that's what will come from it.
And imagine and so one of the basic tenets on which Talim was founded was we leave stuff on the table because we don't hear every person's voice.
Agreed.
And the the loss, the lack of privilege that some voices have in the room just means they don't speak up. But if we could gather all of those voices, whether, irrespective of gender and skin color and race and socioeconomic background and neurodiversity and like all of those things, how much richer would our teams and organizations and society be? And yet, and this is where the intentional design comes in. It's like, unless we intentionally design it, we're designing for the majority. And that's something that we really need to avoid.
Because we're missing out on so much.
Yes.
And you can be selfish around it, if that works for you. You're just missing out. Why
Yeah.
would you do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Hajira Shaheen, thank you so much for joining me today. I wish you every success in your entrepreneurial journey. I have no doubt it will be fabulous. And I hope you'll stay in touch and perhaps join us again on Boost Talk in the future.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Louise. It was a really fun conversation.
Hello, Louise Phelan here, and you've been listening to yet another Boost Talk, and I know you loved it. These women are being so generous with their time and their experience and their expertise, and it's great to have their perspective on their career enhancement strategies for women in this post-pandemic hybrid workplace that we find ourselves in. So for more information, head on over to our website, boostyourcareer.com.au, and I'll see you there.